Hello, everyone, and welcome to DevOps Summit Canada 2022. Today, I'm super excited to be the host of this industry panel called Structuring Your Enterprise for Scaled DevOps Excellence. I have with me some really good friends and experts who have actually performed these in various enterprises at different scales, and I'm really looking forward to all the insights and the expertise that they're going to share and really get those pearls of wisdom that we can apply within our enterprises in order to be more successful and scale DevOps within our enterprise. So first, I think because we have such an intimate crowd, what I would like us to do is to get to know the panelists a little better. So Garima, why don't we take the popcorn approach, and I'll start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself, your background, and a little bit of the DevOps work that you've done, and then you can hand it over to one of the other panelists.
Thank you, Gautam. And I'm Garima Bajpai. I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada. I'm the founder for the DevOps community of practice here in Canada, which has several chapters: Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Edmonton, Atlantic provinces, which has 1,300 plus leadership members. I'm also the chair for the ambassador group at CD Foundation, Continuous Delivery Foundation. I work closely with DevOps Institute. I'm also the chair for the chapter in Canada. And I have various strategic roles and advisory roles in different companies. Now, what I bring to the table today in this panel is, obviously, I work with organizations where in the capacity of strategy execution. And I often feel that, there is a gap between strategy as well, when you connect the strategy to the business results. And there where your operating model comes very, handy in terms of, how do you actually close that gap from a strategy to the business results. So I'll talk more about it from a community perspective, that how your community can support you to build that relationship or connection with strategy and the business outcome, and plan your DevOps outcome in a pragmatic way. So let's continue this dialogue in this panel. I'll give this fora to Savinder to do his introduction. So Savinder, over to you.
Thanks, Garima. Hi, I'm Savinder, and I'm currently based in India, in Pune. I have about 20 plus years of experience. I've been into DevOps right from day one. I'm probably one of the few people you'll meet whose first job used to be what we used to call then a build jockey. So I've started from that era when we used to build on 8 flavors of Unix and 7 flavors of Windows back in the early 2000s. So I've kind of been around the room. I'm a DevOps ambassador with DevOps Institute. So work with CDF very closely with Garima and a couple others here on the call. I've also managed to write a book on how to build a career in DevOps, which is available on Amazon worldwide. Thank you for the shameless plug. And about my experience in large-scale transformation, I used to work with a system integrator for close to 7 years, and I was based in the UK. So I've had the fortune to work very closely with a couple of banks and a couple of large retailers and help them with their transformation. And I'm currently working with a bank in Eastern Europe and living this transformation as I speak. So I can talk from the trenches because I am facing those bullets and dodging those bullets every single day. So I'm fresh from the trenches here. And I'll hand it over to Niladri.
Thanks, Savinder. Thanks, Gautam and Garima. I'm Niladri Chaudhary, CEO of Excellentro and the Chief Organizer for DevOps India Summit, and a new one which is coming up on February 10th, which is DevOps Asia Summit, which will be hybrid with physical location in Singapore. I've been also involved with IT for like 33 years, and DevOps from the 2015 kind of time, DevOps SRE, primarily focused on consulting and training on these. So get to interact with a lot of people who are doing it, who we try to help out on in certain aspects. And like Savinder, I have also published my first book last year, which is called Adapting to Industry Infinity, New Wow for IT Services. And my focus is more in terms of the new ways of working, where DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, VSM, all these plays a role. So it's from that point of view that we need to change our way of doing things to be able to deliver better value for, I would say, everybody talks about customer. Yes, better value for customer, but I say customer, business, and employees. All the three. So yeah, with that, I hand over to Gautam.
Thank you. Thank you all. This is going to be an exciting panel. I can already feel it with all the energy and the different perspectives that are coming in. A little bit about me. I'm Gautam Palapa. I'm the founder of Transformity and an executive advisor at VMware. I work with large Global 2000 companies and Fortune 500 companies and help them on their digital transformation journey. And I approach things more from a people, process, and culture perspective first, rather than technology. I have led several transformations in the past, and we've successfully been able to move multiple workloads all into the cloud using Lean, Agile, and DevOps principles. And so I have, like all the others on the panels, a number of scars, as I call it, that I am happy to share. And one of the things we will explore are some of those anti-patterns that commonly, appear in all these enterprises. And in the interest of giving emotional support to both Niladri and Savinder, I've also published a book, and my book is called Leading with Empathy, Understanding the Needs of Today's Workforce, where I focus on how Lean, Agile, and DevOps and all kinds of technology transformations are actually rooted in empathy. And the goal is to elevate human quality of life and have them focus on high-value activities. So I will probably be bringing that aspect of it as we talk. So it's going to be an exciting panel. I can just feel it. So let's start off, right? DevOps is critical for all the digital-first companies that have focused on delivering a sustained pace of customer-centric features, right? However, what many enterprises have found out over the last 32 months is that it's not easy to scale DevOps. So some teams within their organizations may have DevOps embedded in their way of working, but a lot of industries and transformational leaders have learned the hard way that it is really hard to scale DevOps and make it part of the enterprise's culture. So what I want to do is first explore what are the various models that we have that we should be using to scale to DevOps, and then afterwards explore what are the challenges, how we can overcome it, and so on. So Niladri, I want to start with you because you bring a very unique perspective here. What are the most common DevOps models out there, and how can leaders start using them?
Sure. So to start with, I'm very practically going. Most of the organizations, what they do is, let's do some CI/CD. Let's build a pipeline and start working on it. And that's where things really doesn't work. So the first aspect that we need to understand is the organization itself, right? Because we need to understand what we are trying to achieve out of it. And it's ultimately value delivery, as I'm mentioning. So once we identify that, then if we work backwards and see what we need to do is important. The other point that needs to be addressed or understood at the beginning is, all said and done, everything is not going to be digital at the very first. So you will have your legacy systems, you have to live with it. So we have to manage our digital transformation for both the legacy and the new ones. And we have to bring in something, the successful organizations that are there, we have to build something which allows you to take the advantage of the new ways of working, as well as give benefit to get better things out of your legacy system. So that, I would say, is the model that we need to look at. Now, I'm not mentioning any specific framework, any specific things. I mean, people are doing CI/CD, people are having platform engineering, people are having SRE. So these are not different things. We have to bring everything together for our objective. We'll discuss further as we go. So I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I like the fact that so early on, we're already talking about CI/CD, we're talking about continuous improvement, and we're talking about incremental progress rather than flashbang or big bang approaches that a lot of organizations take. So for example, in several enterprises, what I've seen is they ask for, what is your DevOps blueprint or template? I'm like, hang on a second. What's your strategy first? Let's talk about a blueprint later. If you don't know how you envision your house to look like, what is the point of me drawing something on a blueprint and giving you something random with squiggly lines or whatever, just because to appease and for you to check a box that you have a DevOps blueprint. So Savindra, I'll go to you because you personally feel the pain of this and a very hierarchical top-down approach in a number of organizations where they say, thou shalt be DevOps from tomorrow, and automatically imagine that people will adopt to it. So I'd like to take your thoughts on that.
Sure, Gautam. So a consultant friend of mine famously said, you cannot Spotify a bank. Right? And I think that's a very, very valid statement. And that's what Niladri was also alluding to. You cannot take what has worked at Google or Facebook or Spotify and just shove it down your organization, because you are not Spotify or Facebook or Google. You are your own organization. It has a different value system. It has a different speed. It has a different character. Right? And the way I like to explain this to the C-level people is, I always begin with the statement, we have to create our own DevOps salad. What goes into that salad, we have to figure it out. Right? And the way I like to explain that is, it's a mixture of top-down and bottom-up. What I mean by top-down is, like Niladri was saying and you were saying, Gautam, what's the vision? What's your house looking like? What do you want to do? It's not the how, it's the what and the why, right? And then couple of teams in any organizations are inherently good at this CI/CD business. That's where the bottom up starts. Now, the trick is making sure these two marry up somewhere. They don't always, right? Because these guys, the bottom up guys, they just want to toy around with the Kubernetes and the AWSs of the world. They don't care about strategy. And the strategy guys, they just want to, get the right things in place. The art is aligning these two. And in my experience, the way to do that is understanding the stakeholder spread. Because different people understand different angles of DevOps, depending on where they approach the elephant from. Right? So if you can get that stakeholder spread and get alignment on the bottom up and the top down, I think then the third element comes in, which is define the right metrics to measure. Because with the strategy, with the tools, if you can define, okay, this year, we will focus on these 3 metrics only, fix them, achieve them, then review them, then change. I think that's somewhere how that salad gets made. That's how I have seen it work in some organizations that I've worked with.
That is great. That's a great visual as well. Plus, it's healthy. Salad, right? It's
I'm
not
trying to lose weight.
It's not a heavy dish. But the reason why I bring in the healthy thing is people need to start looking at it as a lightweight approach that can be easily assembled and integrated. And you can have any kind of combinations. Like, there is no one recipe for creating a salad. There are so many different ways and so many different types And it's all okay. It is very custom made and bespoke to you and your health requirements. And Garima, I know that Savinder touched on a number of things that you and I have been talking about that we're very passionate. I love the fact you brought the measures that matter, because that is really important. So I think it just makes sense for me to turn it over to you so that we can hear your perspective and all the experiences that you have had regarding DevOps and rolling it out and all those various things. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Gautam. And I'll start with the strategic angle, because that's where, my day-to-day work, leads me to. So from that perspective, I think it is very important to understand the why. Let's go back a little, a few steps back and say why we are doing DevOps. Obviously, there are many perspectives, but from where I belong to, there are two perspectives which are very, very, defined. The first one is that there is a demand of new services, new capabilities, new products, because the user behavior is changing. We have more users who want to go digital, who want to have digital products and services. So that's the first thing. The second thing which I believe is steering this need is that the shortening lifespan of products and services. If you see from the past, these products and services lived at least 20, 30 years, but now the product lifespan itself is shortening. What it has taken us to do is we have to roll out features faster, because there is a change required according to the customer segmentation. And this actually associates us to DevOps. Why DevOps becomes critical for strategic organizations? Because it enables you to build that business outcome and enables to have new revenue streams. New business models like B2B business models, B2C business model, marketplace offerings. There's so many things which it's changing in this context just because the need is changing, right? So let's now connect the dots. Now, why we are talking about operating model? So operating model connects the strategy to business outcomes. So this operating model will help you deliver value which is needed. And if you think about the components of operating model, there are several, research work and findings and reports. You can refer to McKinsey, BCG reports, say, and Y. All of them have produced, how to build an operating model for next generation products and services. But I think for this discussion, I'll highlight 4 components. The first and foremost components, and I've written this down because I need to take it in the sequence. So the first thing is management flow, because I come from a large organization where we have multiple product lines. Now, if you think about this, there is obviously ambiguity, there is inefficiency in the management flow itself. So obviously, you have to have an operating model which supports your day-to-day feature releases, right? So how do you make it happen? Through the operating model. The second thing, which is cross-functional, teams, cross-functional individuals, and cross-functional organization. Because if you don't have that, you'll not be able to roll out the products and services which are needed for next generation. The third point is who has the decision rights? When it comes to funding, when it comes to, how do you engage with, let's say, several hyperscale providers? What is the strategy? So there has to be a decision maker. There cannot be an ambiguity. You cannot leave it to the machines, right? And the fourth point is, I think it's in some organizations, it's over producing, and some organizations are overlooking it, is technology and architecture. Because if your technology and architecture does not support your operating model, everything will fall apart. So this is how I foresee that the discussion and the components are kind of, and bringing that together, it can be that it is different for different organizations, and we will talk about it in more detail. But I think going back and elaborating the basics would help this conversation to build further.
Love
Over
it.
to you, Gaurav.
Love it. Love it. Those are really four powerful points that you bring. And I also like the fact that all three of you are emphasizing the fact that you need to start with your vision or your aspiration, the why you want to bring DevOps in. It's not just, oh, everyone's doing it, so we need to do it. And it's not like, oh, these are shiny tools, or someone read somewhere that DevOps will help deliver revenue faster, so we need to adopt it. Those are not the right drivers. So having the right why is really important. And I also I want to add one more thing. I mean, it's not just about clearly understanding the why. I think where a number of organizational leaders probably can benefit is understanding that if they are clearly articulating the why or the purpose of DevOps and this DevOps transformation, next, they should never second guess how the teams are going to accomplish. And that is something that several leaders struggle with. And one of the reasons why I've observed that is we define what value is. We define what the aspiration is, or the why of DevOps. So once we say, oh, we know this is the value, or we say, once we achieve this business outcomes, then we will have value. But a lot of people stop there, and they don't go to the next thing of saying, okay, what is your definition of success? Because this is a continuous improvement mechanism. How do you know that you have already embraced it? How do you know that enough is enough? Because after a while, it is just diminishing returns, and you're just changing technology for the sake of changing technology, or you're embracing resume-driven development within your organization, which is also equally bad. So I want to open it up to the group, and actually, I'll do it a little different. Rather than calling upon anyone, I'll ask the most passionate person to start speaking, and it's okay if both of you collide. That's the beauty of having an intimate group. But how would you help leaders and change agents within the organization understand the definition of success for each value that is being brought in?
Absolutely. Let me take it first. So the point here is, as all of you said, that the why, right? So we have to understand that traditionally things were different. We were having a very structured requirement, and based on that, we produced whatever was required. But today it is not like that. Today, the requirements are changing from the customer side. The technology is changing from the service provider side. So both sides, there is change. Number two, IT is no longer a cost center. IT is business. You cannot have any business without IT. Even the guy who sells Pani Puri opposite me, he wants the money to be paid through Google Pay or Phone Pay or RuPay, right? Nothing else. So everything is IT. So, and the other aspect is, if you look at it, the different personas who are using our service, our product, is also different. It's not the same. We cannot give a one-size-fits-all approach. I use a bank account for a corporate, whereas somebody else uses it as a salary account, or somebody uses it as an investment. Now, how can you have the same solution to everybody? It cannot. And people today are looking at it in entirety. What I call it as the servitized product. Nobody is selling a product anymore. People are selling a servitized product. If you ask me, I'll just look at a phone and I'll buy a phone. You ask my daughter, she will go to the shop and ask, okay, with this phone, how much of cloud space are you giving so that I can store my documents and pictures? So you expect a service along with it. If you look at a Uber, you are not buying a taxi service, you are buying a travel experience. As Savinder said about Spotify, you are not buying a song like what we used to buy in our CDs. we are buying a musical entertainment experience. So we need to look into totality. So that definitely is something which the users, the leaders have to first understand. That why are we doing it in your business, why you need to do it. And they have to also acknowledge that if I do not do it in my organization, I will lose to my competitor. It is not about growth, it is about survival also. And you cannot survive without growth. Think of the old banks. Now, Savinder has been in UK, right? Will Savinder go to a SBI kind of a bank where, let's say, there is no online transaction available? Will you go? No, right? But will you go to a Monzo bank which has no branches, only online transactions? Yes. In 4 years, in only UK, they made 750,000 customers. Now, that is the kind of change that is happening. So, in your business, in your domain, you need to understand how to survive, how to grow. Once you know that, that is your why, then you get into the next step of the what. And that's where you get into the concepts of project to product approach. You are getting into the concept of you have to collaboratively work with the customers. That's where you're talking about hypothesis-driven development. You are looking at design thinking and all those things. It's not independent. You have to tie it all together. And then you get into your how part of it, which is your DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE and all. The other aspect which I want to touch, which earlier Savinder has touched upon, and also Garima and you talked about it, there is a need for a change in the organization design, not a change in the organization structure. Our organization structure, if you look at, we learn so many things of agility from Toyota, but they are a very strong functional organization. The point is, how do we change the organization design to make everybody motivated equally for the same common shared objective? If you have your incentives different for a developer and a tester and an infrastructure guy and so on, it will never work together, whatever tool we use. That's where you have to bring the things together. Now, these are kind of aspects which the leadership has to understand. Right? So that's how I would put it, as what leadership needs to understand. And one more aspect which I feel, and that's a question to all the other panelists, is that somewhere a lot of the leaders are not in touch with what is happening on the ground. We are more people managers. But in today's world, we cannot live with just managing people. It is not sending some bodies to some client. It is about taking ownership of their outcome, business outcome. So you need to understand what you do. I mean, you don't need to really write Python code and all, but at least you need to understand what CI/CD is. What is the different kinds of branching that you do? At least to that extent, you need to. I was just talking to a DevOps head in one organization, I'll not name. And she is coming from a traditional background and all. And now she has started realizing that, hey, I need to understand these things to be able to better help my team to deliver what we are expecting to deliver. Right? Over to you. Anybody, you can add on.
Actually, I'll add on to what Miladri you have said, and I think I'll be short. The first point which comes to my mind is that a lot of times the leaders are not having platforms where they can upskill themselves. So that's a real challenge. And that is why I think we had created this community of practice of DevOps. That was one of the intentions of doing that. So I see that day to day from my own perspective, there's a lot to learn. And from an operating model perspective, I will also highlight one more point, that there are 3 levels of changes which are required. The individual level changes, which is basically how you upskill your individual talent, right? How do they take ownership of their upskilling? How do you support from an organization perspective what is needed? Then it comes teams. It's not an individual play, it's a team sport, right? So how do you build that teams which can work together? And it's a learning curve, and it needs a lot of due diligence. Your processes, you should have tools, you should have capabilities, incentives, all of them together. And the third aspect is organization, how the organization can work together. There are different teams, there are siloed initiatives. And when you come across, scaling DevOps for an enterprise, these 3 aspects are important and they have to work in tandem. So how do you build that structure which supports each other? Now, again, reflecting to the same topic, where we started, Gautam, measuring these results. I see there are a lot of matrices available for measurement. Some of these organizations are more popular. These measurements are more popular than others. But I think there is a room and need to kind of have a conversation and dialogue on what matrices would fit into your context. And I think this comes back to the point that how these matrices support the operating model, the scaling of operating model, which is obviously we can have a discussion on any other day, but this is again an evolution which will take place. Yeah. Right. Savinder, you want to add something to this?
Yep. I will be really short, and I want to share one strategy which I use when I talk to organizations who have started on this journey. I like to call upon certain roles and ask them, what is your understanding of DevOps? Not for Spotify, not for Facebook, but for your organization. What do you expect will change Monday morning, 3 months later, and 6 months later? And the roles that I like to call upon are first the guy who's heading technology, CTO or whatever you call that person, the guy who's making all the tooling decisions. Then second, head of operations, because that guy's life, guy or girl's life is completely going to transform and they have no freaking clue about it. That's third, head of infrastructure. Because the moment you start going converged and hyper converged and edge and all of that, their life is going to change. Fourth one, very neglected people, enterprise architecture team. They sit in their own ivory towers and have no clue what is going on because they still are in their legacy, heritage, beautiful drawn UML diagrams. And more often than not, they don't understand this world. And then the last person is the head of person who's responsible for security. Not InfoSec, embedding security into the product. And then, of course, the head of development and QA and all of those guys follow. But these are the top 4 or 5 people that I like to meet, discuss, and make sure they're at least understanding that some big tsunami is coming their way and they need to be ready. So that's my take.
That's awesome. I love it. I want to add one more role to yours.
Sure.
We do very similar things as well. And what we are doing by going through this exercise is getting to a common understanding of what DevOps is and what the expectation is supposed to be. So the additional persona that I'd like to add is business.
Yeah,
I call in business as well, because I don't want business to imagine that just because we're implementing or having a DevOps strategy doesn't mean that we're going to revolutionize everything overnight. We need to set the expectation of how quickly or how slowly change is going to affect the acceleration to value. So that's why I bring it. But these are really great points. We talked about org design. We talked about reconfiguring around flow, common OKRs to make sure that everyone is aligning towards the right behavior. We talked about
May I add a couple of points?
Yeah.
Saminder's points and Garima's points gives me some more ideas to speak about. And as you rightly said, today we are talking about any transformation is about innovation. Innovation means continuous learning. Innovation means experimentation. So if you look at innovation, what I say is you have to move from a building mindset to a learning mindset. You don't just deliver some code. You don't just build, you learn how to make things better for whoever you are doing it, even for yourself. And when you are asking the question about why are you doing DevOps, people generally answers about the organization. And I specifically say, why are you doing DevOps? As in, why Savinder is doing DevOps? Why Gautam is doing DevOps? Why Garima is doing DevOps? So experimentation becomes very important, and even HBR talks about it. So experimentation does not mean just doing some testing out some things. Experimentation means that the organization, the leadership has given you that autonomy to try out things which will even make you fail. Is your organization confident? Is your leadership confident that yes, if something breaks, it is fine? That is what is DevOps about, right? So that is how you learn. So experimentation means psychological safety. Experimentation means you are trying out new ways, learning from the failure, not stopping failure.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, which I always find it very common in organizations, is what I call framework silos. We have organization silos, we have technology silos, now we have framework silos. So basically what we are talking about is you have your agile initiative running, you have your safe initiative running, you have your maybe a ITIL kind of or CM or something running there, you have DevOps running, you have SRE running, but each one is running independently. But if you look at it, all of them have the same objective as far as the business is concerned, as far as the organization is concerned. So we have to merge those things if you really want to scale in an organization. You break that framework silo, bring everything together, do whatever is needed to achieve that objective. Over to you.
That's great. And actually, it's a great segue into some anti-patterns that appear in an enterprise. And Neeladri, you started off with having a siloed approach where people are not talking to each other and frameworks do not connect. It's like, people laying the railroad. And Savinder, you brought this example of the top and the bottom thing, where people are laying the railroad from East Coast and West Coast, but they're hopeful that it will connect, but you never know. Even 1 degree difference is going to make a lot of change, and they can never do. So I think if we can segue over to the anti-patterns that leaders need to be concerned about, we talked about the framework silos. There was one word that you actually a couple of words that really made me happy. The first thing is to talk about failures. The second thing is to create psychological safety. So one of the things I do want to stress upon, and then I'll open it up to everyone, is this fact or this particular perception that failure is not an option within an enterprise is something that is really killing the innovation thing, and it's really killing people to run experiments, because there is not enough trust and psychological safety within the organization, because there will be punitive charges or there will be penalties in case someone fails. And I think that is one of the anti-patterns that a lot of the leaders have to address up front. And honestly, we in DevOps we have the phrase celebrate failure, or like fail fast, often, and cheap. We keep reiterating that. But for me, and then I'll open it up to the group, I believe the word failure is actually not the right word. When you get an outcome which is not expected, and I call this unexpected outcomes rather than failures. When my outcome is not expected and it deviates from what I'm expecting or what I predict, I am still learning a ton from it. I am getting a lot of value. I am sharing that value within the organization. And at that point, what people call as a failure is actually a lot of learning. And there are so many stories about it. So that's another anti-pattern that I think leaders need to really embrace and encourage and celebrate the unexpected outcomes. Garima, what are some other thoughts that or anti-patterns that you have seen?
Right. I'll give you some practical examples, starting from your own, like not owning your failures. I think we'll have to also connect the dots here, like why is this happening? And one of the drivers, there can be several, but one of the drivers is that we still work in silos. And when that happens, you find somebody accountable to be blamed for a failure. So as an organization operating model evolves, you have to look at better business possibilities. If you're experimenting, you need to embrace co-creation. You need to understand how the marketplace thinking is evolving. How do you embrace, more and more people to accept the co-creation and accountability of co-creation, So that's the first, I think that's one of the first anti-patterns I see, that, you want to do DevOps, but in your siloed and fragmented environment and taking full accountability from top to bottom. So that's one thing. The second aspect, and I'll relate it to practical approaches, like we all are seeing recession and, we hear about day-to-day basis, and what there are concrete gaps in plan, action, and result. So we are seeing that the result of this recession would be, impacting the business. So what leaders are kind of taking an action of laying off people. Think about it. These gaps are kind of very evident in the practical kind of operating scenario. So you start seeing that your operating model needs some efficiencies, and the efficiencies you drive is, laying off your people. Instead, you need to transform your mindset and see better possibilities of getting inefficiencies out of your system, getting risks out of your system, and DevOps can help you there. But you'll have to kind of create that kind of mindset that you start looking at your operating model. How do you redefine job roles? How do you redefine team structure? How do you redefine your organization to be more efficient? How do you create that more possibilities where you can connect the talent, the projects, the opportunities, and the outcome together in a platform-centric way? So I'll stop here, because I can go on and on with these kind of anti-patterns, giving you examples of it. But I would like to hear from Niladri as well as Savinder. What is your take on it?
All right, Savinder.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go first. Yeah, Niladri, stop for 2 seconds, so I'll take that. Fastest finger first.
No, I was waiting for you to start.
All right, thank you, sir. So I'll start with a quote by a guy called Gerald Weinberg, who's written this Psychology of Computer Programming. And he has a very famous quote. He says, no matter what they tell you, it's a people problem. So that's, to me, is the biggest anti-pattern for DevOps. How do you change this 200 grams, whatever it is up here, right? And I'll give you a couple of practical examples. In one organization for the support team, as these guys are the support engineers, right? We went from a centralized support function to a decentralized support function. And we said, instead of having a central team, there are about 20 odd squads. So these 2 people are mapped to these 2 squads, something like that, right? And as the first step, instead of all 20 of you sitting together, why don't each one of you sit with your squads? So physically move your location from this building to that building. And this and that building in those days was a 5-minute walk. That's all. Literally a 5-minute door-to-door walk. That's when people used to come to offices, right? And we had huge resistance. No, how can you change my place? I am a support guy. I need quiet to take calls. When you sit with the squad, there is so much noise. I can't concentrate. That's where it starts. Forget changing mindset. They're not even willing to change their seats, their locations. That's one. The second one, where we were, and Garima touched about it, where in one retail organization, we were moving from primarily on-premise to a Kubernetes-based system. And there were some people who were so religious about the tool set they were using that they took 4 months to do proof of concepts on why I cannot let go of my tool. It was deep-rooted passion and love for the tool they were using, which was obviously not suitable for this new cloud-first platform which we were creating. And it's got nothing to do with the tool. All it's got to do is, I've used this thing for 5 years. I love it. If you throw something new at me, I will fail at it. And the last thing which I wanted to talk, Gautam, you talk about failure. I also like to define the extent of failure, because in a lot of senior management's head, when you say failure, they think a failed release is equal to $1 million loss, is equal to a lawsuit, is equal to my career down the road. That's not what failure we are talking about. We are talking in the new microservices world, in the world of A/B testing, in the world of feature flags. We are talking about 20 people using this versus 30 people using that feature. That's the failure we are talking about. A very non-consequential failure. They don't even understand the definition of what failure we are talking in this new world. They still are in that old failure mode. So I'll pause here. That's what I had to share.
That is awesome. Niladri.
Yeah. So again, couple of things. Savinder is cursing me now.
No stress.
So one of the things is anti-pattern again is about, which Garima I think pointed a bit, or one of you pointed out, is about the architecture itself. The point is, how much time are we spending on refactoring, re-architecting? We are all talking about microservices and all. We don't start with a greenfield, we start with a brownfield. So we have to make changes to that. So who is doing that? When are you giving that time for people, each one of us, to do that change? That is one, again, an anti-pattern which needs to be looked at, and you have to change it. Starting from agile to DevOps, everywhere, when you are talking about that smaller chunk of work, we have to start thinking smaller. We cannot think monolith. Again, Savinder's point, it is here, not anywhere else. It's not in technology, not in tool. The other aspect which I would like to point out, which Garima specified, is about the upskilling, the cross-skilling part of it. And Gautam, you talked about the collaboration about it. That is where we need that experimentation. And that is where we need extensively to use dojos. Unfortunately, even today, when I have spoken not only to people who are doing things, I have spoken to Gartner analysts. And it took me some time to make them understand dojo is not a training ground, like a structured course, like a structured lab. A dojo is where the team comes, the cross-functional team that all of you are talking about, including business, with a business problem, to hypothesize and experiment that, to find out what is the best solution. there is a major difference between a dojo and any other learning platform. The problem is everybody looks at dojo as another LMS. Somewhere where we will have structured course, people can go and go through that. That is not the point. The reason for this is so that we can keep on investing on that innovation, keep on learning new things which will help in innovation. So that concept of continuous learning comes into play only when you experiment. And this also gives you two other things. Technology and all, people learns how to solve it. But what it also does is learn to collaborate, because you start collaborating with that cross-functionality. And second, what it does is it allows you to think differently, empathize with the group, keeping in mind about the ultimate outcome that you are trying to do, rather than a fixed focused scenario. Now, if you leaders have to look at getting that done, invest in, if you really want to get into scaling, you want to spread across the concept to everybody, you have to do that. And that also helps in one more point. Like, as you said, the people who are very stuck with their own product, we don't want to let go of that, right? We need to handhold them. We need to give them that comfort feel, that psychological safety, that, hey, if you do this, you are not losing your job. And you can also do it. It's not that cool kids like Savinder can do it. Even the older people like us can do it. Right? So that hand-holding is required. And again, the dojo helps you in doing that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. And I know we can talk a lot about this, but I do want to stress upon one thing, one anti-pattern that I've observed. It's that, and we touched upon it a little bit, people don't quantify what they're expecting. They don't actually have that clear, quantifiable, SMART goal or definition of success. They make it like, oh, you are going to do X things. So for example, they're going to say, I want to improve patient experience, let's say within a hospital. But sure, that's a great thing, that or outcome that you want to get. But what is the definition of success? What does that mean? So instead, if you say something like, within 12 months, I want to make sure that I want to reduce the wait time from when the patient checks in to seeing the physician by 26%. That is quantifiable, and that is something you can strive towards, and it will then help you get the right data to have those decision makings that is needed in order to achieve the success. So that is another anti-pattern. And I know everyone's on this panel is super passionate. We've had a lot of insight and thoughts, but unfortunately, we have to wrap. I want to give 30 seconds to each, starting with you, Garima, then Savinder, then Niladri. 30 seconds, one pearl of wisdom or one thing that you can have the audience take away with.
Yeah, so I would say let's take away the to-do list for scaling the enterprise for DevOps, which in my mind from this conversation is three aspects. The key components of the operating model, where we can introduce experimentation, embracing failures, chaos engineering, observability, those kind of things. The second aspect is how to measure. So how do we go beyond DORA matrices and try to kind of steer that business outcome and also align it with operating model? And the third aspect and the key takeaway is how do you redefine your roles, your people, function, teams, organization? And we have to do it now, so that we can build a perspective for the future organizations who are trying to scale DevOps. Yeah, that's it.
All right, Savinder.
Yep. So my 30 seconds, do not copy anybody's DevOps, create your own DevOps salad. And what that means, what that means for your organization. Get inspired from everybody, that's perfectly fine. But then come back and create your own salad. Yep, awesome. That's it, Niladri.
Thanks. So my 30 seconds is communicate. bring that communication to everybody. Whatever good you are doing, tell everybody. Whatever challenges you are facing, tell everybody. Take people along with you, let them understand what is happening. I mean, even to the extent I say that if you look at a configuration management, it is also about communication. If you look at the CI/CD pipeline, it is a communication. The whole team understands where the change is happening, what, right? So DevOps, DevSecOps, everything is about communication.
Awesome. Thank you. I think my 30 seconds is clearly understand your why, understand why you're doing this, and then bring the customer-centric approach towards it. The whole reason why you're doing DevOps is because you are reducing the pain somewhere, be it for a customer, be it for the workforce, be it for stakeholders, or for the enterprise, but you are reducing pain somewhere. So make sure that you understand and you are making the people working within the organization passionate about reducing that pain, and then the adoption rate is going to increase. So with that, I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much. We've had a really good, passionate conversation. I really loved all the points and the insights and the thoughts that you've had. Audience, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I've had moderating this. There's a ton of content out there, and I hope you also enjoy the rest of DevOps Summit Canada. Thank you. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, everyone.